What's up, everyone? It's Lens Addict here, and today I'm going to be talking about the M2 MacBook Air and if you should buy one. So I've been thinking about it a lot. I've been using my M2 MacBook Air quite a bit, and I don't think you should get one unless you really like the new design and you aren't going to be using it for heavy use because the SSD is slower. So unless you get the 5112 gig model, it is noticeably slower, especially when the 8 gigabytes of RAM fills up. So even on Lightroom, just stitching like 25 photos together for a panorama, it's noticeably slower than the M1 MacBook Air. And throttling wise, it seems to be about the same or worse. And so my recommendation is if you have the money, go on Facebook Marketplace and get an M1 MacBook Air. They go for about $800, $900, which is much cheaper. It's pretty much half the price. And then spend the rest on dongles or additional storage or whatever it is that you want to spend the money on. Go on a holiday. Now, if you do have the money to spend, go get the 14-inch MacBook Pro or wait for the M2 14-inch MacBook Pro. The 13-inch one I actually do like, but once again, it's still got the slow SSD. It doesn't throttle, but and it's also missing MagSafe. So you're getting less ports, you're paying more, and it's got a worse webcam. But yeah, I'll talk about the pros, I guess, of the M2 MacBook Air, because if you have the money, there are some advantages. If you're just doing very light web browsing and you want the lightest, nicest, newest laptop, it's good. Yeah, the webcam is good. The speakers are decent, although I noticed like a keyboard rattle with certain voice calls, which I wasn't that impressed with. Which the M1 MacBook Air did not have because it had dedicated speaker holes, whereas the M2 puts the sound through the keyboard. So not a huge fan of that either. But yeah, the lack of a fan is good if you're doing audio recording work. The battery life is actually quite good. And the GPU core difference is not that noticeable in my opinion. So if you have the money, I'd recommend the M2 if you want the thinnest, lightest laptop and you're willing to, spec it up to 5112 gig, then it's a pretty decent laptop actually. It's pretty good compared to a lot of Windows laptops. But, once you do that, you're not far off from getting a 14-inch, 14, especially used on Marketplace once again, or on sale. The 14-inch one goes cheaper now because it's been out for a while. So you could get a 14-inch instead, but gaming-wise, it's okay, but it throttles once again, so it's really good for like 5-10 minutes, and then once it gets hot, especially in really hot, like warm places, it throttles. And yes, you can open it up and do thermal pad mods, but I don't believe in buying a device and modifying it like that. It should come from the factory. If you try and do a warranty claim, they might say, oh, you've modified it, this thermal pad mod's bent the motherboard, causing something to fail, or, it's not the nicest thing to do. And, your average person's not going to actually go out and buy one of these and open it up and add thermal pads. Power users will do that. But the M1 MacBook Air had a much better thermal spreader heatsink. And it seems disappointing that it's a downgrade in that regard. Although the CPU and GPU performance is improved from the M1 MacBook Air, yes, it has been improved. The GPU has been improved, the CPU hasn't been improved, but it seems to run hotter than especially the M2 MacBook Pro also runs hotter. So I remember when I was playing games on it, I'd notice the fan running all the time, and I went, wow, I never noticed the fan on the M1 MacBook Pro. And that was my favorite feature. It pretty much never heard the fan no matter what you did. But the M2, if you play, I was playing The Sims 4 and full graphics settings. Admittedly, it played it perfectly, good frame rate and everything. But the fan was running and I was like, oh no, it's just like the old laptops that have the fan running all the time now. The cons of the M2 MacBook Air are the increased price. You pay a lot more for a device that is worse in some ways, but also better. So it's worse with the SSD, slower, worse thermal throttling under sustained high load, and worse because it's a much higher price, especially because it's not going used at all. Better, the webcam is better. Better, the MagSafe charging is there, which is nice. You get you get your 2 USB-C ports to do other things. And better because in theory you'll get longer support from Apple. If you're exporting ProRes video, that will also go faster, but once again, your average MacBook Air user is probably not buying the MacBook Air to export ProRes video all the time, so that seems a little bit strange to me.